Have you ever noticed how the developers of Skyrim subtly guide the player into believing Saadia's story without question? And what if I told you that the key to figuring out who's actually telling the truth, Kematu or Saadia, lies in the ban on worshipping Talos, the very thing that started the civil war in Skyrim? There are countless videos discussing which one of them is lying, but almost all of them miss a single detail, a detail that clearly reveals who's telling the truth. So, in this video, I'm going to put an end to the debate once and for all and show you who the real traitor to Hammerfell is. Let's start with how the developers subtly push players, especially those who don't dig too deeply into the quest, toward believing Saadia. Bethesda usually doesn't put much effort into making their characters conventionally attractive, but with Saadia, they clearly did. And even though the company's games usually don't draw attention to the beauty of individual NPCs, Kematu makes several remarks, directly and indirectly, about Saadia's looks.
Shazra, Saadia, one of those, correct? Did she appeal to your sense of honor, your greed? A more base need, perhaps. Don't allow yourself to be fooled by a pretty face. You're better than that.
This is no accident. They designed her to be appealing so that players would trust her instinctively. This works because of the halo effect, a psychological bias where someone's attractiveness makes us attribute to them honesty, kindness, and other positive traits. As a result, many players see Saadia as a victim and take her story at face value. But is that really the truth? To find out, let's go back to the White Gold Concordat, the peace treaty between the Empire and the Aldmeri Dominion. This treaty banned Talos worship in Skyrim, something the game emphasizes heavily, but there were other terms too, like handing over all of southern Hammerfell to the Dominion, a territory the elves had already seized before the treaty was even signed. You can read about this in the in-game book The Great War, which you might come across while exploring Skyrim. The two most controversial terms of the Concordat were the banning of the worship of Talos and the cession of a large section of southern Hammerfell, most of what was already occupied by Aldmeri forces. Hammerfell, however, refused to accept the White Gold Concordat, being unwilling to concede defeat and the loss of so much of their territory. In the end, the heroic Redguards fought the Aldmeri Dominion to a standstill, although the war lasted for 5 more years and left southern Hammerfell devastated. Despite part of Hammerfell being devastated, the Redguards still managed to drive the Aldmeri Dominion out of their territory after signing a separate peace treaty. And if you look at the map, you'll see that Tanith is in the southern part of Hammerfell. It confirms that the city of Tanith was indeed under Dominion occupation. Exactly what Kematu says, blaming Saadia for it.
Saadia, as you know her, is wanted by the noble houses of Tanith for treason. We were hired to see her return to Hammerfell for her crimes. She sold the city out to the Aldmeri Dominion. Were it not for her betrayal, Tanith could have held its ground in the war.
The same book also explains that, even before Skyrim's events, Redguard warriors fiercely opposed giving up their lands to the elves. They drove the Dominion out entirely and became a fully independent state, aligned with neither the Empire nor the Dominion. Keep this in mind. We'll come back to it later. Now, think about what Saadia says regarding why she's being hunted. She can't give any clear reason why Hammerfell's warriors are after her.
I don't know for sure. I spoke out against the Aldmeri Dominion publicly. I suspect that's why these men were hired to hunt me down.
Kematu, on the other hand, says they plan to take her back to Hammerfell for execution on charges of treason.
She sold the city out to the Aldmeri Dominion. Were it not for her betrayal, Tanith could have held its ground in the war. The other noble houses discovered her betrayal, and she fled. They want her brought back alive.
If you kill Saadia after Kematu paralyzes her, he reacts strongly, saying you've ruined everything.
All that effort and you just kill her? You've ruined everything.
That reaction makes it clear he didn't plan to kill her on the spot. He was going to take her somewhere. Saadia also claims that going to the city guards is dangerous because they would betray her.
You think I'd be in hiding if this was something I trusted town guards to handle? These men are ruthless, cunning, deceitful. They'll pay off whoever they can. I can't trust anyone here in Whiterun. Guards and Jarls can be bought. And the Alakir are close. I'm running out of time, so I'm choosing to trust you.
But in reality, the guards refuse to let the Redguards into the city.
Look, you already have been told you're not allowed here. Turn around and go back the way you came.
We're causing no trouble. All we ask is to look for her.
I don't care what you're doing. After what happened, you're lucky I don't toss you in jail. Now get lost.
We will be back. This is not over.
And one of them was even caught trying to sneak in.
I have dishonored my brothers by being captured. and so they have left me here. My life with the Alakir is over now.
Even this alone makes her story suspicious. But, as I said earlier, Hammerfell at the time of Skyrim's events is an independent state that fought against the Aldmeri Dominion and won. So ask yourself, why would Saadia flee from a country where almost everyone hates the Dominion, supposedly because she spoke out against that same Dominion? And she didn't just flee anywhere. She went to the Empire, which is heavily influenced by the Dominion, not to Stormcloak-controlled territory, but to Whiterun, a city under Imperial control, where Thalmor agents walk around freely with prisoners. If you've seen my short video on this, you know where they're taking their prisoner.
Recently, while wandering through Skyrim, I came across Thalmor soldiers who were escorting a prisoner. After going through all sorts of trials, I finally reached their destination, namely the dungeon of Castle Durin Solitude.
The Thalmor openly work with the Empire and can imprison its citizens without consequence, so fleeing from Hammerfell to Skyrim makes about as much sense as living in the USA during World War II, openly speaking against Nazi Germany, and then to escape Nazi agents fleeing to Nazi-occupied France, where they're everywhere. Alright, let's assume she fled not after the war, but during or before it. One thing we know for certain. She was a noblewoman in Hammerfell. She says so herself.
I am not the person that the people of Whiterun think I am. My real name is Eamon. I am a noble of House Suda in Hammerfell.
Kematu also claims she was directly responsible for the fall of Tanith.
She sold the city out to the Aldmeri Dominion. Were it not for her betrayal, Tanith could have held its ground in the war.
If she were just a commoner, it's unlikely she could have had that kind of influence. And let me clear up a common myth right away. Just because she has a scar on her face doesn't mean she's from the lower classes. First, I don't think her scar is any proof that she isn't of noble blood. She could have easily gotten it during a hunt or some similar activity. It's also possible she had already been captured once and spent time in captivity, where she could have gotten that scar. Second, it's far more likely that the developers gave her the scar simply to highlight her individuality. Because in the story, Redguard warriors are searching for her, she needed some distinctive feature so players wouldn't confuse her with other characters. And the easiest way to do that, of course, was to give her a scar.
Now come along quietly and we won't have to get rough. Brother, I think she's telling the truth. She doesn't have the scar. What? Oh, you're right.
All signs point to her being of noble origin, so before the Dominion's forces reached her city, she could have easily moved to the still unoccupied parts of Hammerfell, where she likely had friends among the nobility. There, she could have lived comfortably rather than working in an inn. Even if her home region had Thalmor sympathizers before the war, she could have gone to northern Hammerfell, where there was no sympathy for the elves at all. Now, let's take a look at some counter-arguments players often bring up in Saadia's defense. The first is that Kematu can be found in Swindler's Den. The logic goes, if he's in Swindler's Den, then he must be a swindler, which means he's a bad guy. In my opinion, this is just another way the developers nudge inattentive players towards siding with Saadia, because simply put, the name itself means absolutely nothing. It's just the name of a location and has nothing to do with the actual story. For example, not far from that cave, there's an abandoned mine called Redoren's Retreat, yet there's no reference at all to the Great House Redoren from Morrowind. It's just full of ordinary bandits. The next counter-argument is that after Kematu paralyzes Saadia, a couple of days later you can supposedly find her burial urn in the Hall of the Dead. In reality, after almost any Whiterun NPC dies, either their burial urn or their coffin appears there. For example, here's what happens if you kill another Redguard of noble birth.
Do you get to the Cloud District very often? Oh, what am I saying? Of course you don't.
Yes, his burial urn will show up in the Hall of the Dead too, just like many other NPCs. When I killed Saadia myself, her burial urn also appeared there after a few days, but when I simply finished the quest, no matter how long I waited, her urn never appeared, so that claim is just plain false. Unless, of course, this really used to be the case and her urn actually did appear in the Hall of the Dead after the Redguards took her away, but it seems that in one of the patches the developers fixed this, because once again, no matter what I did, her burial urn simply wouldn't appear. And yet, when I killed other NPCs, their urns and coffins would still show up within just a couple of days. But really, everything I've said so far isn't even the most important part, because, as I mentioned at the start of the video, there's one detail that makes everything clear.
She sold the city out to the Aldmeri Dominion. Were it not for her betrayal, Tanith could have held its ground in the war. The other noble houses discovered her betrayal, and she fled. They want her brought back alive. Now we'll take our friend here back to Hammerfell, where she will pay the price for her treason.
The men who are looking for me, the Alakir, They are assassins in the employ of the Aldmeri Dominion. They wish to exchange my blood for gold. I need you to root them out and drive them away before they find me and drag me back to Hammerfell for an execution.
As you can see, both of them say the same thing. She's going to be taken to Hammerfell for execution. So, she's supposedly being executed for speaking out against the Dominion in a country that only just defeated the Dominion? Considering all of this, it's safe to say, if Saadia were truly telling the truth, and Thalmor agents were after her, Hammerfell would have been the safest place for her. It's literally a country that hates the Dominion as much as she claims to. So, in your next playthrough, you'll know exactly whose side to take.